Let's see. Our next speaker, Bruce Greenstein, is the Chief Technology Officer of the Department of Health and Human Services. Personal editorial, one of the most powerful agencies in Washington, touches everybody's life from the beginning of the day to the end. As the Chief Technology Officer at HHS, Bruce provides leadership and direction to ensure that HHS effectively uses data, technology, and innovation to improve the lives of the American people and the performance of the operating divisions of the department. He joins HHS after serving as president of West at Quartet. In his last government role, Bruce held a cabinet post with Governor Bobby Jindal of Louisiana as the Secretary of the Department of Health and Hospitals. As the chief of Louisiana's largest agency, he led over 11,000 employees and a budget over $9 billion. With a talented executive team, Bruce led many reforms of the state's healthcare system, including implementing managed care for over 1 million enrollees, privatizing state healthcare facilities, increasing the state's adoption of health information technology, and passionately leading the Birth Outcomes Initiative. Prior to his position as the Secretary of the Department of Health and Hospitals in Louisiana, Bruce was an executive at Microsoft, where he led the company's worldwide health and human service business vertical with teams across the globe. He developed and led the worldwide go-to market strategy and execution, as well as the development, promotion, and maintenance of relationships with government and healthcare elites, CEOs, ministers, secretaries, healthcare organizations throughout the world. He drove Microsoft's value to customers in healthcare. Before Microsoft, Bruce held senior positions in the federal government with the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services, as well as Florida state government. One other note, the environment in the state of Louisiana after Hurricane Katrina, a lot of people focused on the storm, not a lot of people focused on the rebuilding. The hard work of getting health care delivered, health infrastructure rebuilt, and everybody at the table was characterized by his work. Exceptional. Our next speaker. Thank you.
Good afternoon. Can I use this mic? Is it okay if I didn't stand up?
Yes,
there? Please. I have a hard time standing still, so this will be a lot better. And do we have a clicker? All right, we got everything here. All right, so it's kind of late in the day, so I want to try to tell a story that will keep your attention, keep you awake, and also there's dinner after this, so to kind of keep your appetite at bay. I want to tell you the story in two ways. One is to make you feel different about government, because we heard it takes decades to go from academic research to actually impact patients. And part of that reason is not because it just takes that long. It's because government bureaucracy often takes a really long time, and we think it takes too long. So there's some things that we want to do to change that, and we'll describe that as well. And the other piece is just flat out, patients can't wait. It's been a long time. I got to see this firsthand. My mom died 10 years ago, recognized it this year. She was on dialysis for 15 years. And I remember taking her, this is in South Florida, taking her to the dialysis center when she first started. It was kind of a curiosity and really needed to see what was going on. And I remember in her last year of life, taking her to the dialysis center, a different one, but in the same town. And what was amazing is 15 years later, it was almost identical service. The technology was the same. The only thing that was better there was she had more cable TV channels to watch that was dedicated to her chair. She thought that was great because she had to spend 4 hours 3 times a week there. And if you go to any other medical society's meetings, if you go to investor conferences, they're not talking about kidney disease. They're talking about oncology, cardiology, other things. Money is flowing like crazy in there. Even in digital health, a company that I watched that was across town in New York City from the startup I worked on, Flatiron, is an EMR for oncology patients, sold for $2 billion because of the data and innovation that's happening there. It's impacting markets. So I want to tell you the story about what we're doing and how we're approaching it. I want to be granular because I don't want you leaving saying, that's just a bunch of hot air. They'll never get to this. I want to give you the details on how we're doing this. And I want to make sure that you understand that this is happening because when we bring government agencies together, FDA, NIH, CMS, and all work together, that we can really make a difference. But we won't do it alone. We're going to do it with patients and clinicians and the industry. This is really a very inclusive effort that we're making here. So let's start out. We talked about HHS. We said that this is one of the most powerful agencies, and it reaches you from the time you wake up till the time you go to sleep. Well, anybody that maybe is in pulmonology and they have CPAPs, we deal with you when you're asleep too. Every minute of the day, from babies before they're babies, prenatal care all the way to getting the coroner's report for vital records after you've died. So we really cover the bases, even beyond cradle to grave. 80,000 employees, another 120,000 contractors. This is the largest government agency in the history of the planet. $1.185 trillion spend per year. Write it out. There's so many zeros, you don't even know when to stop as you're writing it. And most of it goes to paying for healthcare services. Now, I'll speed up to a different slide that I have about how much we spend on kidney dialysis. All right, we're going the wrong way here. I'm not sure where the deck is. All right, I'm going to stop because they're moving differently. Can you go back to the beginning of the deck? Okay, cool. All right, I'll wait. All right, they're different. Good, good, good. So we'll go to the next one. I'll keep it here. So kidney dialysis, we spend a lot. Everybody would agree. Let's put it in context. It'll reach $35 billion this year. And to put that in context, the amount we spend in Medicare on the one line for kidney dialysis is larger than the entire NASA budget, our whole space program, plus the entire Department of Commerce. And then just for fun, like to make sure you're not rounding down, throw in the FTC and FCC in there. And kidney dialysis is still bigger. And the government pays for almost the entirety of the spend nationally. And we're what's called, I'm an economist, so I love to use the terms. So we're a monopsony buyer, where there's generally one buyer in the market. And there's really two major sellers, a duopoly. And it's not 100% market share, but somewhere in the mid-80s. And so we have this situation where unless we make it clear what we want, nothing's going to happen. Because listen, if you're in the industry, you would say, oh yeah, well, so you haven't really said anything's wrong. You haven't asked for anything differently. You just keep reducing how much you pay us, and we think you're getting savings, and that's okay. So while we love the fact that there are these big machines that keep people with kidney failure alive, and I watched my mom survive for 15 years because of that. Without that, it wouldn't have happened. But it's not enough, and it's not enough to have something that is life-preserving that doesn't innovate for 60 years. I keep looking for another example to think, this can't be the only thing in healthcare that's 60 years old and hasn't changed. But I don't know. Nobody's been able to give me something else. 60 years, no change. So let's talk about what we want to do with it. We're starting by organizing this effort in our office. It's the Office of the Chief Technology Officer. Now, why is that important? Not because it's technology. It's actually quite strategic because we have different agencies within HHS that all work on kidney stuff, and they don't necessarily all get together with the explicit idea of changing the status quo. Awesome work being done at FDA, incredible research being done at NIH, CMS figuring out how to pay a little less for things to save money. But we all haven't come together to say, this is awful, and we need to change it. And for whatever, organizational dynamics and not a rallying cry in the department to make things changed, that's what we're doing here. So we take the power of this office. I report directly to the secretary. The secretary cares about it. The secretary is going to meet with us, with patients, later this week. Secretary's dad had a transplant, not PHI. He said it in public before. So, and my mom died from this and been on dialysis for 15 years. This is like the perfect time to get people that understand this from the patient level, not just from spreadsheets and policy. So we really want to make sure we go as far as we can that way. In the rest of the office, the other piece that makes this a good fit is that we focus on innovation. We're out with investors, with new companies and entrepreneurs and startups all the time. We know how they think. Many of the people, myself included, on our team come from that part of the industry. We like to move fast. The idea of anything that has to do with decades is not really the way we think, except maybe saving for college tuition for our kids. And if we're thinking about it now, it's too late. It would be good to start really early. But our point is that we're not an office that is associated with patience. It's that's not with the T, I mean with the C. We're really about being impatient. And so this is the right place to push things. Rather than think about things on a quarterly basis or annual basis, we think about it on a weekly and a monthly basis. We want to move things quickly. This is what I just mentioned before, part of the reason why that for us to gain attention from people that do the financing, it's usually a surprise. Interestingly, kidney dialysis represents a full % of the entire federal budget. One line for kidney, this is for ESRD, not for all the other associated comorbidities and payments. So just think about this is a very large piece of the budget. We spend a ton of time thinking about other parts of the budget that are much, much smaller. Here we have a very large piece. It's time to put together a very concerted effort to address it. So here's the purpose. And let's go through this. I want to be very specific because what we're trying to address here is exactly what the lack of has caused us from not making a lot of progress. When we say patient-centered, we don't mean just figuring out how to pay less for the same thing and calling that innovation, but it's about what patients want more of. How does their life get better? How does the life for their family get better? Again, urgent. I don't really need to, hopefully you can get it from my voice and walking around. When we think about achievable, we are thinking big, and we're starting, I won't say small, we're starting appropriately. Our goal is to make this sustainable. It's to start with, and I'll show you the steps afterwards, and the idea is that we really change the market as we're going through this process. And most importantly, it's something that lasts for a really long time. It has to be sustainable. Otherwise, we get maybe a little bit of innovation on the front end and nothing else changes. But instead, we like to think that we can change some elements or the whole thing for people with ESRD, and then we like to move it back to diagnostic and then move it back to preventive to change the entire continuum when it comes down to kidney disease. It's easy to think that, well, this is this guy's pet project. You know, he knows about it because of his mom. But instead, this is something that the entire HHS and the White House is very interested in. I was at the White House 2 weeks ago briefing White House officials on this project and the rest of our portfolio. I had to keep moving them off of this project because I had a lot to cover, but they kept coming back. And it was tough to manage my time. But this is something that is so clear to people that are interested in ways to harness the power of an incredibly dynamic American economy and make it shine for the people who we serve. And so that's perfect. Last week, for example, I was at the White House Summit on Artificial Intelligence, and it was very clear again that we're focused in areas where we bring the power of the private sector in working with academics and working with government to come up with better solutions and not slow down that process of innovation in our economy. So it's great. We work together, and this is definitely on the priority list now. Here's another element that has been standing in our way for a long time. This is a very risky business. And if you're an investor in a large healthcare company, maybe you're running the ventures fund, maybe you're in a private equity firm or a venture capital firm, are you going to put your money into solutions to address kidney disease? Well, if the big buyer, the monopsony buyer, doesn't really express a big interest in buying something differently in the future than they are today, and you can't produce that service any less than you're producing it today, it's probably not a good idea. So we're changing that. So if you take a look at this, we want to put money in our X Prize competition authority. We've used it many times to do a lot of innovation across the healthcare side within HHS. when we say increases the shots on goal, we want more innovators and more investors and more inventors to come to the table and figure out how to address kidney disease. Not everyone's going to be a winner, but we think that if we have more tries, we have a much better shot of doing it. We're working with FDA to understand and sort of streamline. We can't change the regulatory process or the threshold, but we want to make it very, very clear so it never, the ambiguity never represents a headwind for innovators and investors to get involved. We need to do the same thing with CMS, because it's one thing to invent the machine or the device or the thing. It's another thing to get paid for it and figure out how to calculate an ROI. And then we got to figure out how to engage and bring it to the market with patients along the way. This is basically what we've failed at for the last probably 50 years. You can imagine there's a lot of high fives. I don't know if they did that 60 years ago. Handshakes maybe, to congratulate each other on creating a dialysis machine. And by the way, I've heard the story where it was invented so many times. There's Seattle and Boston. Maybe afterwards somebody who really knows can tell me where it was invented first. No, not now, not now. This is going to break out into a brawl. But I really would like to know. I live in Seattle now, so I'm a little bit partial. But I lived in Boston as well, so I'm hedging. So this is the way we think about it. We are partnering with ASN to have a fund that's going to be, we call the Kidney Disease Innovation Fund. It's an accelerator. It's meant to get this party moving. We can't stay where we're at today. At the same time, as we've gone around the country and talked to private investors, we see that there's a lot of interest to say, oh, if you're going to open up the market, we're interested in doing something in our own investments. So we're happy to work with those this investment funds where they'll take equity in companies that come through, or own companies, or direct their own companies. And then, of course, there's all kinds of others, individuals that may be individuals and companies that are self-funded that want to be into this in this new era of innovation as well. And so we'll be working with them along the way. We're starting out with the Kidney Innovation Fund with ASN as we speak. It's in the planning phase. I'll get to that. This is how we see the prize structure moving. So these are non-dilutive funds. So in other words, we're making grants essentially through this X Prize competition. We don't take equity in these companies. We're not conflicted along the way. But it's not just give the money out and then say, oh, come back whenever you guys are done. It's pretty rigorous in terms of milestones and accomplishments and achievements along the way. So if you see how we're going to engage, by the way, these slides can be available to anybody that wants a copy of these afterwards, so you don't have to take pictures or write them down. And they're full of words, so they're meant to be illustrative for what's going on. But again, the idea is that the structure is pretty rigorous and pretty detailed, and the idea is that we want to help companies, investors, and innovators move through the process along the way with feedback and milestones and gates. We don't want to waste our money. We want to really encourage these innovations that are going to turn out to be able to impact patients. Here are what our success measures are. Pretty standard as we think about them. We're looking for greater insight. So if you're reading these right now thinking, oh, they're missing a definite one, or they could do this one a different way, come see me afterwards and some of the other people on the team that are working on this. We haven't released the X Prize announcements yet, and we can bake them into the way that we go forward, both internally at HHS as well as the way we organize the competition. Here's what the timeline looks like. Again, think big, start small. I wouldn't call this small. Maybe it was when we just thought about it at the conference table in my office. Now I think this is a pretty big thing as it is, and it's just getting bigger. Just 2 weeks ago, ASN and my office signed an MOU that we're formally now engaged in a partnership. You'll see there's a lot going on in 2018, by the way. So the pilot prize we're talking about fall of 2018, that's not that far, it's like a quarter away, that we'll make the announcement on what the prize competition, the dollars, and the criteria look like. And then you can see we'll release the money and then even more money next year. So this is happening. We're focused on treating patients differently with new technologies. That's at the end of the day what matters. This is a methodology to get there. We think it's superior to any other approach that we've taken in the past because I just sort of look at outcomes. Like nothing's changed in the last 60 years in the medical technology. I can't remember what's changed thinking about my mom's treatment since maybe the mid-90s. So we've got a lot of ground to make up. We want to go very fast. We can't do it without everyone's help. That's within the government, where we're working very closely. It's with academics, it's with the industry, but most importantly, it's with patients. And again, this is not a check the box. I'm going to remember that, the petting zoo. It's crazy to think that way. But we find that we get such great input by patients and their families to help us think through about the directions that we need to go, what a go-to-market strategy would look like, how people consume either technologies or services that may not be apparent to venture capitalists in New York or Silicon Valley. So make sure that we stay close and working together. All right, and then keep in touch with us. We'll be here today and tomorrow, and we'll be at Kidney Week again, which is not too far off. And so to close it, I'll just tell my kind of funny story about Kidney Week. Who all here was at Kidney Week in the fall? Okay, so I go check in my hotel, and I used to live in Louisiana. I was the Secretary of Health there. So New Orleans is a special place. So I go to check in my hotel, and they didn't have my name listed. And I said, well, I'm part of a group with the American Nephrology Society. And nope, can't find it. Anything else? Like, Kidney Week, maybe? Oh, Kidney Week. I got you here. It looks up. Kidney Week, is that a food festival? I didn't make that up. But anyhow, thank you very much, and be excited to take questions on the panel.